Yeah. Yeah. Welcome, Drun, Drunvalo.
Uh, Thank you, Alfred, for inviting me on your show. Thank you.
I was totally amazed last year when I was traveling back from Capilla del Monte in Argentina. It's about an 8 hour bus ride on a
Yeah,
public bus
yeah, I've done.
from Capilla del Monte to Buenos Aires. And these are fancy buses which have stewardesses and meals, and they have movies like they do on airlines.
Really,
And the movies that they had were Drunvalo Melchizedek videos.
really?
Yes. And I wondered if you could talk just a bit about that, how it is that your videos end up, not in this specific case, but how it is that your videos end up on public buses throughout the world.
Well, I don't actually know the answer to that question, and I didn't even know it was happening. Uh, all I can say is I've spent a lot of time in South America. I've been all over, just not everywhere, but a lot of places, and I really love them. And I really have great respect for who they are, and so I don't know. Somebody that owns that bus line must has probably seen my videos somewhere or something. But I've that's amazing, really.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know that you're under a timeline now for a new book. Is that something that you can talk about? You've written 4 books.
Yes, the last book was called The Serpent of Light, and I began to talk about the indigenous people, which included a lot of work down in Peru and Chile and various places down in there. And for the last 4 years or so since that book has been written, I haven't written anything, and all the work I've been doing has been on video and film and documentaries and things like this. And so my publisher, Wiser Publishing, they felt I should catch everybody up what's happened in the last 4 years. And so this is an extension of The Serpent of Light. And it'll be called The Serpent of Light Bites Its Tail.
Wow.
Uh, and there's a lot has happened, a lot of very interesting things, and there are some things right on the horizon right now. We're going to find out probably in the next 10, 12 days that if they happen, it'll be huge. In fact, the largest event that's ever occurred on Earth may occur and be approved in just the next few days. We'll have to see and find out.
Yeah. Can you talk about some of the themes or some of the things that you're looking forward to, or perhaps this event or
Well, the event we don't know for certain yet. Every single thing in this event is completed. It's ready to go. There's a tiny detail. It's a big one.
okay?
And it has completely to do with the Mayans
I see.
and the date December 21st, 2012. And they want to bring that event to the world. And it is
Yeah, sorry.
that's okay. But I've actually been asked not to talk about this until they announce it to the world.
Sure.
But it will be between 2 and 2.5 billion people watching this at one time, the largest event ever on Earth, if it occurs.
Right.
And I think it will, but we don't know that for sure because there is a couple little details that have to take place first, and we'll soon find out. But I hope so. It'll be really a blessing for the world if it happens.
Sure. Well, the title of our segment here is co-creating a positive timeline for the Earth, 2012 to 2025, And it sounds like you are looking at a positive timeline. Is that the case?
Yes, absolutely. I have spent a great deal of time with the Mayans on many different levels of their councils and etc. for since about 1985, and so I've spent a long time with them. And at this point, I am on the It's a Mayan Council. They and what has happened here is the world only knows uh, half of the Mayan prophecy. They've heard the end of the male cycle that ends on that day, and throughout time, and they have a minimum of 26,000 years, according to them, of memory. Minimum. They really have a lot longer than that, but they will acknowledge 26,000 years. And they know what happens when we come to this end of the cycle. And the world always, the old world, the world that was generated by male consciousness, it always dissolves away, because now the polarity of the earth switches from male to female at that moment, and the female takes over. And so she, in her softness and her nurturing, she can see exactly what needs to be done, where the males just want to fight and keep going.
Right.
And so she can understand and she can see that. And so that's what's about to happen, is the female comes in and saves us, basically, from the total destruction by transforming us from male to female. Now, 13,000 years from now, when we reach the other end of this cycle, what happens there is the same thing, only with the males. The females then get so overbearing and so controlling that the males come in and save us from them.
I see. So this is a cycle.
This is a cycle. It's a spiral, actually. It keeps
A spiral
around. It's never exactly the same, but it's always the same events occurring in similar kinds of ways. And so the males take it on and they save us, and as we go into the darkness for 13,000 years. But then in the last 2,000 years, which is what we've been going into, it's the same thing. The males get too male, too overbearing, too warlike, and then the females come in and stop it all and start us again on a softer, smoother, more loving way of solving our problems.
Is a concept of source a personal concept of deity, or is it a principle, or are we part of source? Is it sort of the male aspect of source and the female aspect of source? How is this working out?
You mean from a Mayan point of view?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they have different layers of this that they speak about to the world. And primarily, their point of view is that the people who are able to make this transition are only those that are living in their heart. Those that are in their brain are not able to make this transition. They are not harmed. They just take a different road, and they'll eventually end up through, from their point of view, in the same place, but it's a real different route that they take. They believe that the people that are living in their hearts will all come together as one living being, that we actually begin to breathe together, very much like the dolphins and the whales. Our biorhythms even connect, and we become one. This is hard to imagine, but it's kind of like the cells in our body create our body, and that makes us. We become cells in a global body that create a very higher form of consciousness. And that is one layer of how they see it. The deeper layers are, I don't know if the world is really ready to even perceive these deeper layers or not. Probably not quite. But it's where they understand that things are not the way they appear to be, very much like the Hindus see the world as Maya, illusion, and not true. They also believe the same thing. And they say that the world does not actually exist in the way that we think it does. We see it as real, as solid, unchangeable, and that if we were to die, that the world would somehow just keep going. But they don't believe that at all. They believe that the world is really pure consciousness. It doesn't have a basis on its own or separate from consciousness itself, and that it is consciousness that can change the external world. And so, when you begin to see that, if you can come to that point of view, then you can see that things can actually be altered from within, and the within can alter what is without, and that changes the whole game of life as we now know it. There are many other spiritual and ancient cultures that have this same belief, but they will normally never talk about it, except to initiates who have been with them for very long periods of time, usually. The Tibetans also believe this, but they won't even discuss it until you've been through 14 lifetimes with them. And so I don't know if it would really do much good to get into those levels of discussing life, because it is so outside of how we perceive the world right now.
Well, you yourself talk about going back to the heart. Mm-hmm. You talk about the importance of the Merkaba, or sort of the etheric body around our deeper soul, being connected up to the heart, and that connection, that dynamic is crucial now to the processes of the energetic transformation that we're going through. And that seems to be consistent with what the Mayans are saying. Could you talk a bit about that?
Well, yes. Now, the Mayans are not the only ones that believe this way.
Right.
There are many of the ancient cultures around Earth that believe this way, even, like, again, the Tibetans and even some of the Hindus, certain Sufis, certain Taoists also believe in very similar principles. And it's first of all, the Merkaba, just to understand what your audience understands what that is, that's an ancient word. Merkaba is closer to the Israeli way or the Hebrew way of looking at things. They call it the Merkaba or the Merkava.
Okay.
But in Egypt, it was the Merkaba.
Okay.
And in the Egyptian terms, it was three words. It was Mer, Ka, and Ba. And Mer means a counter-rotating field of light, literally. And Ka means spirit, and Ba means body. And so when you put them together, the interpretation is that it's a counter-rotating field of light that will bring the spirit and the body from one world to another. That's what it actually means.
I see.
So from even the Tibetan understandings, you cannot leave Earth and move to a higher level of consciousness if you do not have your Merkaba functioning. And almost everyone on Earth does not have their Merkaba functioning. There's hardly anyone. Out of 7 billion, there may be at this moment maybe 50 or 60 million, which is a lot on one level, but not very many relative to the whole. And but that could change. There are many positive scenarios that could occur that could change this very rapidly. And we'll have to see how it all works out, because I really don't know for sure what life is going to do here. It's mostly in the hands of an aspect of us that, again, we in this industrial world don't really accept. And that is that the Earth is a living being, and that she is conscious and aware of every single thing that's going on the surface of the Earth and inside of the Earth and around it. And that the sun is also a living being, and that there's another level of consciousness associated with that that comes directly from the sun. Really, if you look at a scientist, almost any scientist, they see that all life on Earth came from the sun, literally. And that everything that's here, that's where it came out of. It came literally out of the light and the radiation that came from the sun. You take that away, and we've got seconds before we're gone. we disappear. At 200 and something degrees below zero, we don't last very long.
Right. You know, this kind of recalls an experience that I had once when I was writing a book in Mexico, and I was attending a private kind of spiritual enclave with Pope John Paul II. But I had my Volkswagen Westphalia, which was a studio in the shadow of Mount Popocatépetl
Yes.
in Mexico, and I was writing the book, and all of a sudden, I was admitted to a conversation between the Earth and the moon, or at least those voices said they were the Earth and the moon.
Yes.
And they said, Alfred, we're going to show you how we create an earthquake. And they did some gyrations between the Earth and the moon. And at that moment, the ground under my Volkswagen Westphalia began to shake. And, you know, they said, well, this is what is happening. Now, I don't know if those were interdimensional voices or if they were trying to tell me something, but do you think that is how Gaia, the being Earth, and whatever
indigenous people all over the world speak with the Earth and the moon and the sun and the heart of this universe also all the time, and they get absolute proof back between just like you just did. And you know, and it's I've seen it so much now that it's just part of my life. I just assume it because I've had hundreds and hundreds of examples of this, and but it doesn't happen to most people in an industrial world. We don't believe it, and we've separated ourselves from Mother Earth and Father Sun. We see the Earth as a rock, just moving through space. We don't think it's alive. And so we have no ability to communicate with it because of the way that our consciousness is arranged within us. But with the indigenous people, it's a whole different thing. It's just like I had two Kogi from Colombia, the Sierra Nevada mountains. I had a Kogi and an Owakos Mamos come up here to do ceremony. And during that time, they asked me if I would take them into the woods because there was several hundred people in this ceremony that was going on, and they weren't used to being around so many people like this. So I took them into the woods, and this was the third day of the ceremony. I think it was the third day, and I just brought them way back into the Red Rocks in Sedona and way back into a canyon that nobody knew about, and I just let them sit there because they don't. When they sit into nature, they go into telepathy, and they don't say words anymore, usually. And if they do, they're doing it for someone like us. And they sat there for a couple hours, totally silent, and I just sat there with them, and I could feel everything from them. And then on the Kogi Mamos, a little bird came and landed on his shoulder, and chirped at him for about 10 minutes. Just chirp, 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 right in his ear, just chirp, chirp, chirp. And he just sat there and listened to this bird chirp in his ear, and then the bird flew away. And he turned to the Kogi Arawakos and said, the bird said that tomorrow this whole ceremony is going to get very, very strange, and that we need to leave tomorrow morning. And so they did. They left tomorrow morning. And that day, exactly that's what happened. The whole thing went crazy. There were people, their egos got involved, and fighting began, and it was very, very weird. And I still, you know, as soon as they said that, I knew. I knew this was going to happen because they're never wrong, and because they're connected directly through Source, through nature. And so this is the way of the indigenous people. We're not aware of it. We don't see it. We don't know it. But there's another reality for them. If it's like when I went into Peru, I was asked there by the Inca shamans. But they invited me when I was in Mexico doing a ceremony with the Mayans. They came to me there and said that they wanted me to come there. So I did. and and they didn't know for sure that I was the right person, because their prophecy said that a group would come from all over the world, and we were coming from, I think it was 23 countries. And they said that this group would come from all over the world, which would fulfill a prophecy that they had, but they weren't certain. So they went into, they began to fast. The shamans were up in the mountains around, we were on, really on Machu Picchu, but they were in the mountains around Machu Picchu fasting. And then when we arrived, they were watching carefully. And what they were looking for were signs that came from nature, things that they could not control, but would show them that I was either we were either who they thought they were or not. And so I had about 50 to 60 people with me, and we were all lined up, and I said, okay, now's the time we're going to begin this, and from this moment forth, we're walking on sacred land, and everything we do is sacred. And they already knew all of this, and we walked through an archway where that happened. And the moment we walked through that archway, a condor flew over and swooped over the top of us, and I knew the moment I saw that we had to be in alignment. And then we went to somewhere. We had to do ceremony in certain kinds of ways through the whole afternoon. And then finally we went to this other place where we had to stop, and we put a sacred cloth on the ground and crystals, and we made an altar. And this was a very special ceremony for the Inca, because many of them had got trapped inside the earth a long time ago, and our purpose was to make a portal for them to come and to live with us on this part of the earth, to make the transition with us. They knew that's what I was supposed to be doing. And right as we got to the most sacred part of the ceremony, either the same condor or another eagle came right over the top of the cloth, spread its wings out, and just sat there for about 10 or 15 minutes. Didn't move. Just not even a feather moved. It was about maybe 2 city blocks above us, but it was filmed. And I knew that was the second one, and I also knew that they always want 3. And I don't know what the third one was. I didn't see it happen. But later, after we were done, the shamans came down in and said, yes, we now know that you are, not meaning me, but this whole group was exactly who was supposed to come there. And they took us into a crystal cave hidden deep underneath the side of the mountain of Machu Picchu. And in there, we did a ceremony where I gave him an eagle feather, and he gave me a condor feather, linking the north and the south together. And it was beautiful. And but this is how the indigenous people move as they move. It is always in conjunction with the heart of the earth and the heart of the sun and the heart of the universe. Nothing, literally nothing, is ever undertaken without their permission.
Now, how, in your judgment or vision, do you think they see the unfoldment as we're going through the galactic plane over 2012 and in these subsequent years?
Well, around the world, they have slightly different ideas about this, and it's not easy for many of them, like the Hopi, who are not in perfect balance at this moment, but maybe they will be soon. And there are many tribes that are kind of hanging on by their fingernails because they've had some, like the Zulu in Africa. I mean, there's hardly any tribe left. They've been killed, and there's really. I don't want to get into all the conspiracy theories, but there's a lot going on around this with the indigenous world and the indigenous world. But it's hard for them. But they do have slightly different ideas, but they're pretty much the same. And they all believe that we now are in the window that the Maya speak about, which is called the end of time. And that window by the Mayan councils is and always has been about 7 to 8 years long in its transition. This window began on October 24th of 2007, and it will end. They don't know exactly the day of the end, but the outermost time is November or December of 2015. They know that. And it could end earlier, up to a year earlier than that. And now again, this is just to show you, and our world isn't even hardly aware of this, even though it's scientific fact, and anybody hearing this is probably not going to believe it, because we never said anything in the outer world, but it's true. And you can go on to any astronomy site and actually see what I'm talking about. But on October 20, well, a little bit earlier than October 24th, a comet came in. I think it was Comet Holmes, Holmes, I think. And it was just a small little comet, no big deal. People tracked it. So what? It was just another comet. But on October 24th, it exploded. And it became, and a blue sphere began to emerge, and it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Right.
Until it became larger than the sun. And it is now recorded as the largest object that has ever appeared in our solar system. And it became a big blue sphere. Well, the Hopis said about 200 years ago that this blue sphere would mark the moment of the time, at the end of time, and that when they saw this, they would know that they had entered into that time. And there it was. The real thing actually happened, and yet it didn't even appear, I don't think, in any newspapers or magazines or anywhere. It just was like a non-event, even though it was the biggest event to ever occur in our solar system. And this is pure science. But they saw it as nature from their point of view. And so that's how they know that we are in the end of time, because they can see through nature that the blue sphere appeared. Now there's going to be a red sphere that ends this time. And at this moment, what would create that? This may or may not be what creates the red sphere, but it's a very good candidate. At this moment, around the belt of Orion, there are 4 stars that kind of surround that or frame the belt of Orion, and one of those is Betelgeuse. And Betelgeuse at the moment is imploding, and they believe it is going to become a supernova. Betelgeuse is very close to us. If it were to become a supernova, we would feel it here on Earth. We would actually feel the shock waves. In fact, there are some scientists say that it would destroy the Earth. But I don't think it's going to destroy the Earth, but I think we're going to feel it. But what it would create is a huge red star in the sky that's going to be there for a long time. And that probably is the candidate that will create the red star at the end of this cycle that we're in. We'll have to see. That, we don't have to wait very long, I don't think, because if the Mayans are correct on this, that cycle ends definitely before January 1st, 2016.
Right. And what sort of changes, what sort of visible changes come in our world and in our society and in our consciousness with the end of time?
Well, one of these changes is the one that most of the world has focused in on, but they don't really understand exactly what it means. Most people don't. Even the movie 2012 really didn't present that movie in the way. It was close in a lot of ways, but they didn't present the effects of what would actually happen if that were to happen. They kind of, at the end of the movie, it's sort of skies cleared and like it was over with. But if that were to actually happen, we wouldn't see the sky again for at least 90,000 years. And that's science talking, because they would put us into an ice age. The average ice age is about 90,000 years long, and you don't see, there's no sunlight during that time, or very, very, very little. But what Don Alejandro Cerrillo, who was the head of the Mayan nation. There's 440 tribes in Mexico, Belize, El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, and a few in some other countries too, but not too much. And he was the head in 2007 when he announced this, and he announced that we are going to have a physical pole shift during this time, which is kind of interesting to me in a lot of levels, because that was also the prediction of Edgar Cayce a long time ago in the 1920s, 30s, that there would be a physical pole shift sometime after 1998. But science doesn't believe that there can be a pole shift this quickly, but there is evidence out there that it only takes 20 hours long when it happens. And what science has also realized recently in the last 15 years or so is that the mechanism that could actually create something like that. For a long time, when science looked at how a pole shift could happen, they were very confused, because if you take something the size of a planet and the mass of a planet, which is rotating, so it's a gyroscope also, and you try to turn the axis to another place, the amount of energy that would be required to do that is so huge that it would be something like the moon crashing into the Earth to be able to do that. There isn't any natural phenomena that we knew of then that would be able to produce that. But now they've learned something. It was a man back, I don't know the exact time, you'd have to find that out, but it was about 1990, maybe early 1990s, who gave a scenario that has now been documented in many different universities, which has to take place before they believe it. And that scenario is pretty interesting. It has to do with the magnetic field. And that's another thing going on right now associated with this that is crucial for people to even understand how to survive if they don't know what's going on with the magnetic field right now. But our science now believes that our magnetic poles are going to reverse themselves and go through not 0 point, but through zero magnetic field. And if that were to happen, which we believe has always happened whenever there's a physical pole, then here is the scenario that science now thinks will happen. They have discovered that the crust of the Earth, which is very thin, it's only about 20 to 40, 50 kilometers deep, and underneath that is a lava plasma field, which is a semi-liquid, and there's between the plasma field and the crust of the Earth is a rock formation that is homogeneous around the entire planet. And that rock is a rock only as long as there is a magnetic field. If the magnetic field goes to zero, after approximately 14 days, that rock formation globally becomes a liquid. And if it does, that means that there is no connection between the liquid aspect inside the Earth and the hard aspect of the crust, and so the crust can spin freely. And so it still would require a lot of energy in order to move the crust. But it takes a lot less energy to just move the crust than the whole planet. Right. But because the water forms off-center at the South Pole, and there's been a lot of theories of why that happens, and a lot of different people have different ideas, but it does. And you've got this massive amount of ice that is not centered on the axis, but is centered off the axis. And if it did go to a liquid center and it became free to move, that massive amount, which is 2.5, 3 miles high of ice, would raise the oceans about 200 feet if it were to melt, would go into the center of the flow and move the entire surface of the Earth by a certain amount. Their computers have calculated this, and they put it at, I can't remember it's either 16 or 17 degrees, And Edgar Cayce predicted the same thing in the same place many years earlier at 1 degree difference, whatever it was. When you calculate where they are, they're almost on exactly the same place on the Earth. It's interesting that psychic and science actually agree with each other right now. That's where the poles would go if it would happen. Right now, the magnetic pole is moving into Siberia. It's so far away from true north, causing huge problems inside of the Earth. I mean, these are not little things; they're really big. And these problems now are being recorded around the world. There's 35 major diseases that are occurring all around the world that are, and which until recently we didn't know why they were being caused. And now we know that what's causing them is the separation between true north, physical pole, and magnetic north, which is now a long ways away from there, and changing more every day, getting further and further away from it. And in Russia, in Moscow, they have now released this information, stating that this is what's going on, that the magnetic pole is making a lot of people sick. One of these problems is something that people have been talking about for about 15 to 20 years, and that's this ringing in the ears that so many people have. It's about 15 to 20% of the population has this, and nobody knew why, and now the Russians have been able to scientifically document that what's causing that is the magnetic field getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and to the point right now where it is ready to actually shift itself to the south becomes the north and the north becomes the south. You won't have any problem with any scientists on Earth not accepting that as a fact. It's actually happening.
And so what is the vision of the sort of not only the earth changes transformation, but the kind of social and ecological transformation that comes out around 2016, do you think?
Well, when it actually occurs, to get that clear, it could happen this minute to that January 1st, 20. They don't know. And nobody knows. None of the indigenous people know for sure exactly when.
I see.
Somewhere in there is when it'll happen. And so even the date, December 21st, 2012, is the moment when the polarity shifts. That isn't necessarily the moment when what we're talking about will happen.
Right.
But this is only, like I said, this is one side of the prediction by them. And there is another part of this prediction that isn't fully understood, but only partially understood by the Mayans and other tribes. And that side is extremely positive.
Okay.
It is the, in other words, they're saying, yes, the old way is going to crumble away, but there is this new form of consciousness that humankind is going to emerge into, which is really positive. And it talks about how we become more than humans, that we begin to interpret the world in a new way, and that we begin to perceive everything differently than we do now, and that we actually we not only survive this, but we survive it in a really beautiful way. And but a lot of the understandings of what this means are again outside of what we could probably accept. It's so outrageous in certain ways. They say, but I'll say part of it. They say that our quarantine on the earth is lifted, and we are no longer limited to here. That we are able to be in other places in the universe, and that we can control where we go. And it isn't in spaceships or anything else like that. It has to do with this new level of consciousness that is about to come into us. And that we will also be met by our brothers and sisters from around the universe that will come here, and that we will be able to see them and to communicate with them clearly, because our new consciousness allows us to be able to communicate with them in ways that we can't now, and we wouldn't be able to see them now. But during this transition that begins to take place, we become something much greater than a human being. Will this really happen? I don't know, but and we'll have to find out. They are clear over and over, all of them, all around the world. This is not the end of the earth, and it is not the end of humankind. It is a transformation that we're going to go through, and they're all preparing themselves for this. I can say this much to you right now. The actual prophecy is not known fully at this moment, but it is emerging on Earth as we speak right now. And for example, the codices that which are books that the Mayans hold, there are only 3 codices on Earth, and have been for a long time, for many hundreds of years, because the Spanish conquistadors came in and we think destroyed them all, but they didn't. They're hidden, and they're coming out right now. And 2 more were discovered about 10 years ago by the Mayans themselves, and were kept secret for a long time until just a few months ago. And one of these codices is called the Kendall Codex, rather. It was brought to me here about 11 months ago by Huns Batzman from the Itza Mayan Council of Elders in the Yucatan in Mexico. And he wanted me to see this because there's been a controversy between the Guatemalan Council of Elders and the Mayan and Yucatan Itza Mayan Council of Elders. The Yucatan Council of Elders believe that the Mayans have been involved in crystal skulls and containing ancient knowledge within those skulls, very much like computers. Crystals can hold knowledge just like computers. That's all computers are, is crystals arranged in different ways so that we can interpret it. But there's other ways to do that. And but the Guatemalan ones, excuse me, Guatemalan Council has been saying that's not true. They have never been involved in crystal skulls. Well, he laid this out. The Kendall Codex has been carbon dated back to about 1300, and it has been authenticated by at least 2 universities now. So this is fact. And there, in the very first frame, it's 13 pages long, and on the first frame, you see them doing ceremony holding 5 crystal skulls. And they're carrying these crystal skulls through this, and on the other side, it shows all these transformations that's taking place. So the idea that Mayans were never involved in crystal skulls is forever over. That is just not true. That they have been involved, and then shortly after that, 7 more codices were released to them, and these codices actually are giving them the information and knowledge which they had forgotten, of how to go into the interdimensional, into the higher dimensional levels of consciousness, which they now know how to do, but they didn't know how to just only a year ago. It's part of their prophecy that in 2010, all of their knowledge would come back to them. It would begin to come back to them, and before December 21st, all of their knowledge would come back. We have now found over 1,000 codices in a museum, hidden in the basement, and we are hoping and believing that all of this knowledge will be returned to them. And in there, we believe that what they're going to find is exactly what you're asking. What is the positive side of all of this? And we are working now to get these copied, translated, and simultaneously, and the Itza Council of Elders we believe, will announce all of this information as it's received and interpreted to the world. The ITSA Council has said just recently to me that they can no longer be secret, that they belong to the world, and that their knowledge must be given to the world. And their ceremonies can't be secret or not. They have to be filmed so that the world can see what they're doing, because for those that understand, this is important for them, as well as for them themselves and many other indigenous tribes around the world. And so we are working now to make this a reality out to the world.
Now, how can people, what's the best way in your judgment, two things. Number one, for people to prepare their vessel to get through these times, and number two, to stay in touch with the information that you've just shared with us?
Well, this information, if Mother Earth allows this information to come out, and I think that it's going to happen, I really do. There's a lot that there are people that are preparing right now to do this. In fact, even Google may be involved in this. And so we'll see how it goes. If they do, it may come out through them. We don't know exactly how it's going to come out. But first of all, and this will be acknowledged all around the world, we must learn how to move out of our brain and into our heart so that we perceive from our heart rather than our brain. This is really important from all over the world. Everybody agrees with this. I don't care almost who they are, whether they're Waitaha or it doesn't even make any difference. They're all in agreement on this, that the only way that we can survive this so that we are consciously involved in what this is, we must be in our heart space. And in our heart space, there is a little tiny space that science has now discovered. It was Stanford that discovered this. There's a little tiny space that creates this huge field around our body. It's two toroidal fields that's 8 to 10 feet in diameter. And they're now believing that this tiny space is the source of everything, the source of everything external, all the planets and everything. It is the place where everything is created from. And so there is really important knowledge that the world is on the edge of, even from scientific levels. And so this is what we need to do. We need to find a way in to our heart and begin to live from there. And then what the indigenous people say is, once we are living in our heart and not our brain, then what we do is we connect our heart to the heart of the earth and the heart of the sun and the heart of the universe. And what Mother Earth says is, anyone that does that has nothing to worry about. They will continue through all of this. They will survive this. And they will be one with her and with Father Son. And so from that point of view, it's really easy thing to do, but it is something that most people don't know how to do. We are creating a method. It's a very ancient method. It goes back into the Vedas, 6,000 years ago, a long time ago, and that method is. It takes 5 days, and in 5 days you can take anybody that's walking down the street that has never even heard of this stuff. But if they have the sincerity within them to understand how to make this transition, we can teach you how in 5 days. And if that is something that you feel that you really want to know, then you can go onto my website and learn how to do it. It's just drunvalo.net. It's that easy. And it's under the School of Remembering. We believe that this is not something you learn how to do. We believe that in your heart you know how to do this, and you've done it many times before. That all you have to do is remember how to do it. And that's what we do. It's a remembering process, and you come out of it in 5 days, and it reaches almost everyone. We just went through 140 people about a month ago, and 136 remembered how to do it in 5 days. Now, some people have such emotional trauma in them that they have to actually figure out how to lower that emotional trauma a little bit before they can get into their heart space, because it's too painful to go in when the trauma is too high. And it's really all it is. So that's my part in helping, and I know that there are many people around the world that are understanding this in different ways. We've now have 52 people that are trained globally all around the world. So if they go in there, they can find a teacher somewhere in the world that can help them do this. It's just called Awakening the Illuminated Heart.
Very good. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience at this very important time about how we should be orienting ourselves and getting through this time?
Well, really, the most important thing is to enter into the heart, and that is the way to the other side of all of this, so that it continues on beyond just the January 1st, 2016. It will continue for a large portion of humanity, but it means a commitment within yourself that you're going to make a change within yourself, and this means beginning not in a selfish way. Really, it won't work that way very often. It isn't just you, it's your family, and all those around you are just as important as you are. And it begins with your family, and you have to care about them as much as you do yourself. And from there it goes out to the whole world. But you have to begin with yourself and your wife and your husband and your children and all of those that you love and are close to you. It's something that you have to begin to love them and take care of them. And because if you can't love your family, you can't find your way into your heart. It's that simple, really. And so you can't just push a magic button or take a magic pill or something else, and this will happen. It begins with love, and it begins with your heart and dropping a lot of things that you have been holding. I mean, we're really like a monkey with the apple in there. We have all kinds of things where we're holding an apple in a jar and we can't escape because we're holding onto this apple. And those apples are things that have happened in our past, that we're angry at people, we're mad at people, or we hate people, or we hate things that have happened to us, or even blaming God for that matter. And we have to let go. We've got to let go, and when we do, we can be free, and it enables us to begin to love our families and ourselves, so that we can begin to find our way into our hearts. And I don't know any other way, because as long as we're holding on to all these things, we can't make the transition. We can't. We will, but we're going to die, and we're going to make a transition that's different than what we're talking about here. Life is never destroyed. No person is ever destroyed. They will always find a way through everything, because God lives within everyone. And we'll always find a way. But this particular thing that Earth is doing now, you have to be in your heart. That's it. There's just no other way. And so I can help you, and there's other people in the world that can help you. And my whole life is focused on nothing but trying to help people find their way into their hearts. So that's about all I can say, I think.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And thank you so much for being with us and for the work that you do.
Yeah. Thank you, Alfred. And thank you for everything you're doing for everyone. And, there's nothing else to do but to help and to serve.
Right. I
There's
agree.
no other place to go. Once you understand what's really going on and you get to a high enough level, you really understand it. It always comes back to you have to be of service to all life everywhere. There's nothing else you can do. So, just love is the answer. It's the answer to every question there is in the world, and it is easy once you allow it to be within your life. It's easy. So, thank you, Alfred.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and until next time, we'll see you then.
Amen.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Goodbye, Alfred.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.